Thank you. So today, although Tessa just mentioned that I work a lot with design thinking, in design thinking there's empathy is really the biggest crux of the whole thing. It's how to relate with someone else. And in my research, in my spare time, I've actually been starting to write a book on relatability. And relatability is not an accepted word in the English dictionary today. And what I would like to do is eventually have it added to the English dictionary. Now, in order to do this, it needs to be used amongst a lot of people in a certain amount of time. For example, in Canada, a double-double just got recently added to an English dictionary, which means 2 cream and 2 sugar added into your coffee. This is only used in Canada when we say a double-double to a Tim Hortons person, but because it's been said over and over and over across Canada, it's added as a word. So the intention of this today is to explain relatability, what I feel it is, and some of the unique traits or what is the ability to relate, so that hopefully at the end of this you'll be able to relate yourselves and understand what relatability is. So quick off is relatability is just basically the ability to relate, right? So it's not much of an English dictionary. This is all I could basically come up with as a description. So I said, okay, well, what are the actual abilities in order to relate? So let's deconstruct it a little bit. So first, let's understand what relation is, right? It's in order to make a connection or in between 2 objects or 2 forms. So whether this is from a person to a person, whether this is from making a connection into a desk or a chair, it could be a connection into your environment. It's a connection in between one entity and the other. It could be a connection in between you and a spiritual world. It's somehow relating and connecting in between one and another. So while I was doing a bunch of research, I noticed that a lot of themes or a lot of the pieces of ability started with the letter C. And ironically, my name starts with the letter C, so I just decided to go with it. I'm not going to argue with it. And so the first one is compassion, which is essentially the most important thing about empathy or how to relate with other people. As you can see here, its meaning actually generates from to love together from back in Latin times. So this compassion is what motivates people to actually see something going wrong or see something going wrong for someone else, and then step out of your shoes and then imagine yourself in someone else and then see how can I help them. So this is a fundamental reason on how to relate with somebody, because now you're stepping out of your own entity and you're putting yourself in someone else's shoes. This is compassion. The second one I want to speak about is collaboration. So to work with another person or a group. In order to relate with someone and to gain relatability and to have relatability, you need to be able to collaborate with someone and listen to them and understand how to form or group ideas and thoughts together as one. Otherwise, if one person is standing here and they have one idea and the other person is standing here and the other idea is formed, and without collaboration, you'll never be able to relate with the other person. So there's no instance of relatability there. Thirdly, we build a connection. So understanding what joins 2 people together. Now, how I mentioned before, a connection doesn't have to always be in between 2 people. It can be a connection in between you and an object. Does somebody have, for example, a ring? And so, yeah, everybody here has a ring, right? Or a lot of people. And you have a connection with that ring that's on your finger, right? So there's no feeling. The ring is not feeling anything for you. But somehow, some way, you've gained a connection to that ring. That's some form, so that you can now relate to others who have a connection with the ring. So that later on, when you're actually speaking with someone and somebody you can relate to another, you can use that relate as a connecting piece. So this is the third point about how relatability and how connection comes in. Fourth, contrast. So in order to be able to relate to other people, I always like to say you need to experience the worst day of your life in order to know what the best day feels like. And you also need to be able to step out of your comfort zone into something that is completely fearful and frightful, into the unknown. Because when you now going back to relate to other people, they are also sometimes stepping out of their comfort zone. And when they want to come to you in times of need, it's usually in that time when they are outside of their comfort zone that they're looking for some kind of relation. They're looking for some kind of direction. And if you haven't stepped out of your comfort zone and understood what it feels like to be uncomfortable, then there's no way for you to gain some type of relatability back to the other person. So this is the essence in terms of your contrast. You need to be able to understand black and white, worst and best, so that other people, when they're experiencing bad and good, you can now relate back to that empathetic way, or that scale. Character. So this is a really interesting one. So as we see throughout each and every one of our individuals, sometimes when we're talking with someone, we're not really listening, or we're just paying attention to the words, and we're not actually understanding, okay, why are they saying this, or what is it about them that carries this message? For example, if you're talking to a child and they use a big word, if you're just listening to the word, you'll let it flow through. But if you actually stop and understand, okay, who is this child? Why are they saying it? And what is part of their character, their characteristics that's causing them to say something? That helps you relate to the child, because it brings you down into their level, and it gets them into the context on how they're saying it and why they're saying that word. Also, it's a set of qualities that makes or differentiates certain options or instances. So if you're in a room and you're trying to relate to a room, you need to be able to understand what are the different qualities or the characters within the room in order so that you can individually relate or gain relation in between all of these different characteristics. This is a really interesting one. So control, when we think about control, generally speaking, it's the direct behavior. So you're always controlling things. Now in relation, it's actually about control and relinquishing control. And you need to be able to understand the difference in between the two. So in order to relate to someone, everybody here maybe has had a boss who is very controlling, and they never actually flip the control aspect and give you the actual respect to take control, right? And then most of us, sometimes when we have a boss who actually does take that and they look at control and then they flip it and then they give you control, that's when you gain the relationship. That's the relatability. Because your boss now has taken control and knows when to give and knows when to receive. And knows how to accept control and knows how to give it. And knows how to empower and knows how to embrace. And knows when to use it and when to give it away. So control is actually a huge portion about relating to someone that we often don't realize what is going on in terms of when we're talking with someone or in a certain circumstance or a situation and what's going on. In order to relate to people and your circumstance, sometimes take a look at where the control boundaries are. Now cooperation, again, this is almost falls under collaboration, cooperation. So this is working together towards one common goal. In order to relate to someone, you need to be able to try and understand and listen to where they're coming from and then help them. So as in design thinking, when someone comes up with an idea, usually the best ideas come from someone else adding on top, and then adding on top, and then adding on top, and adding on top. And as soon as someone comes in and shoots it down, which I'm sure every single one of us has always felt at some point in time, probably once every single day, someone comes in and says, no, that's not going to work, or no, that's not going to relate. That crushes your relationship. It's like the word but. When you use a word, when you start a sentence and you say, okay, I really enjoyed what you presented today, but I think I would rather see this, this, and this. As soon as you say the word but, you completely crush everything that you just said about how much you appreciated someone that just gave a presentation. because that person will all of a sudden hear but, and then the cooperation disseminates. It's gone. So cooperation is all about bonding and creating a relationship and then towards a common goal. Communication is obviously a really big aspect in terms of how to relate. Now, the one thing I want to talk about here is that it says it's a message that is given to someone, a letter, a telephone call, and everything. So try and imagine what other forms of communication that go on that we don't even know about. For example, have you ever been in a room and all of a sudden you feel a presence? You know someone is there. Nobody made a word, nobody made a sound, you just feel it. Well, how is that communication? That's communication through energy. There's some kind of form, there's some kind of way that our bodies are able to communicate with what's going on in the situation that's above a message or a telephone. Another cool example, actually, and where they're starting to do research, is taking the stimulation from your brain, a thought, a feeling, and transmitting it down into data so that you can actually send it over a telephone line to someone else who actually plugs on something on top of their head, and now you can start transmitting feelings. So if you imagine if now, before days you'd actually pick up a telephone and you start talking to someone, in a couple of years you'll be able to actually put on a headset and tell someone that you love them through the heart. That's a form of communication. And that's how we relate to other people. Pretty crazy. The last one that I want to touch on today is coextensive, which is having the same spatial moments or iteration. So understanding where you are in context of who, what, where, when, why, and how. So just having spatial recognition and be able to imagine yourself and then take yourself out of space and time and then just put yourself in the moment. For example, have you ever had been in a conversation with someone that's so deep that then all of a sudden something drastic could happen, like a big sound, and you guys are so locked into the eyes that no matter what sound or whatever just happened, it doesn't matter. That's because you are in space and time in that existential moment, and nothing that happens outside of what's in your world or in the external world will affect what's going on with that space and time or that coexistence that's happening in between. So these are some of the things that I'd like to summarize as this is how we relate to people. This is how I try and explain what relatability is. And hopefully today you guys have a sense of what I mean by relatability. So thank you very much.